Coming up on Network Africa, Guinea Junta restricts its members from running in national elections as it announces a transitional government. U.S. President Joe Biden nominates head of Africa Centers for Disease Control, Dr. John Nkagasong, to lead a public health program aimed at combating HIV/AIDS in Africa. Plus, young African climate activists join their counterparts in Milan, Italy for climate talks at the Youth for Climate Conference. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. Guinea's military junta has barred its members from running in the next elections that is supposed to mark a return to civilian rule. It came as the junta announced on Monday a transitional charter that confirmed military leader Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya as the president following the coup earlier this month. The charter also provides for a government headed by a civilian prime minister and a National Transitional Council that will temporarily act as a parliament. The council will have 81 members drawn from society, including business leaders, political parties, religious organizations, diplomats, and professional organizations. At least 30% of the council members must be female and will include a president and 2 vice presidents. The council will decide on the length of the period in which it will govern before an election can be held to usher in a democratic government. The junta has been holding talks in recent weeks with people from all walks of life to build a consensus on the country's future, including a time frame for a return to civilian rule. Well, joining us now for more discussions is African Affairs analyst Achike Trude. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Lion.
Well, this transitional charter is coming just weeks after a series of meetings with various members of society, the junta meeting with religious and political leaders and also ECOWAS. What impacts do you think this will have, in accelerating Guinea's return to civilian rule?
Well, I think this is, Africa has been rife with coups over the past few decades, especially from the periods of independence. And so this is nothing new. What we're seeing is what we have been used to seeing in Africa. A new government comes in undemocratically through military intervention. The people hail that government because they have been disappointed by the civilian administrations that should have done much better than they did. And so they begin to look at these people who would eventually be their oppressors, eventually as the heroes. Because they have gotten rid of the previous government that didn't really add value to their lives. And so it's unfortunate from what we're seeing. I do not think there's going to be anything new that will change, regardless of the name that you give whatever military arrangement or civilian arrangement that comes that is put in place. It's sad. Yes, they have been consulting with a lot of people, and that is good. You could look at it from that perspective, and you could say it is good. But if you look at it deeply, you realize that the people they are consulting, the organizations they are consulting, do not really have a say, on what is going to happen. They're just going to tell them what they want to do, and they try to get them, on board. But even if they are not willing to get on board, the military junta will just, as well go ahead and do whatever they want to do. And so let's see how it develops. Now this is the period of romance. Eventually, the law will begin to wear away because there will be expectations, even in the short term, not to talk of the long term. And so by the time people begin to see the government move in a completely different way and they change their posturing towards the government, how is the military junta going to react? It is at that moment that that the people will have to, ask themselves whether these people are actually the liberators or they are going to add to their wounds. So it's still early days yet. Let's see. The discussion is a good thing, but it doesn't end at that.
Well, they've called it the Transitional Charter, and they've also announced how it will be made up, with Colonel Doumbouya being president. What do you think? Isn't that a win for the junta, seeing that this is the same man who was the coup leader, and now he would be president of the charter?
Yes, well, I think it's a dilemma for ECOWAS because, of course, you know that ECOWAS has been involved in all of the coups that have been taking place to ensure that there's some level of, that there's as much as quickly as possible a move to civilian governance. But it is not a good one for ECOWAS and the international community. And because what we're seeing is
we have all silent.
Yeah, because rather than discourage the coupists, what it is happening is that these arrangements, just like you have talked about, these arrangements where people who have been involved in a treasonable act. Do not also forget that the act of violent overthrow of a civilian government, an elected government, is in itself a treasonable act. It is an offense. And so you find a situation where ECOWAS finds itself, is in a dilemma with what to do with the coupists. And so what they do is, accommodate them through a political arrangement of a transition government. And so you find the people who have committed very serious crimes against the state being brought in as part of the solution to resolving the crisis that they themselves in the first place, it brought about. So you are kind of rewarding, they are kind of rewarding the people who should be punished. So there's nothing punitive about what is going on. You can see what the coupists in Guinea have done. They have moved ahead of ECOWAS. The discussions that ECOWAS had in places like Niger and Chad and so on, with the opposition groups and the civil society groups, the Guinean military leadership has gone ahead to do that. So that tells you that really they are in the driving seat. And it's unfortunate, like you said. It is a reward, and that's why we have seen, all of these coups that are taking place in one country or the other in West Africa. You see it being replicated in other, countries in West Africa, because there's a reward system. Everything that happens ultimately at the end of the day seems to reward the people who should be punished, and that is what has emboldened others.
All right, then, African Affairs analyst Chike Chude, thank you for your thoughts on Network Africa.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Eritrea is faulting the U.S. and its European allies for, quote, defending the Tigray People Liberation Front's illicit and dangerous acts and insurrection and mayhem. Well, Foreign Minister Osman Salih said that the position of certain countries is inexcusable. In a pre-recorded message at the General Assembly debates, the Eritrean Foreign Minister also highlighted that the grave danger that this reckless and illicit acts by TPLF to Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Horn of Africa region as a whole is too evident.
And the illicit acts by this rogue group to Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Horn of Africa region as a whole for elaboration. But what we find inexcusable is the position of certain countries, notably the United States and its European allies, to defend the TPLF's illicit and dangerous acts of insurrection and mayhem, and marshal all the tools in their disposal to rehabilitate it at any cost. I will not waste your time here to recount the false narratives they have floated to create moral equivalence between the principal culprit and those compelled to take deterrent and reactive action warranted by international law and established state practice. This act in itself underlines the structural inadequacy of the global governance system that I intimated earlier in my speech. Eritrea has suffered enormously by similar previous acts. This should not recur again. The injustices meted on Eritrea by powers who feel they can trample the sovereignty of nations and peoples at their whim must indeed come to an end.
4 Rwandan soldiers have died in military operations against the Islamist militants in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province. Well, this is the first time Rwanda has announced casualties in its 1,000-strong contingent since the beginning of its military intervention in Mozambique. According to Rwandan media, the 4 soldiers died and 4 others were seriously wounded in fierce battles. However, it is unclear where exactly in Cabo Delgado province the Rwandan soldiers were killed. Last Saturday, Mozambique's president and his Rwandan counterpart presided over an award ceremony for soldiers who had given commendable resistance to militants in various parts of Cabo Delgado since the beginning of the insurgency. In recent years, there has been a worrisome trend towards the modernization and expansion of nuclear arsenals. That's according to the UN High Representatives for Disarmament Affairs, Izumi Nakamitsu, who says, as the global arms control regime crumbles, multilateral nuclear disarmament diplomacy has deteriorated. She was speaking on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
In recent years, we have seen a worrisome trend towards the modernization and expansion of nuclear arsenals. As the global arms control regime has crumbled, multilateral nuclear disarmament diplomacy has atrophied. As relations continue to decline among states that possess nuclear weapons, we cannot take for granted that the norm against nuclear testing will hold. The best way to uphold a norm against testing is to reaffirm and enhance support for the CTBT, to reinforce its existing strengths and to strive to bring about its entry into force. We must not lose sight of the fact that the CTBT does not operate in a vacuum and that its full potential is realized when it works in tandem with other processes related to nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation.
The significance of the CTBT, and indeed its 25th anniversary, must be understood within the broader context of our collective goal of universal, non-discriminatory and verifiable nuclear disarmament.
U.S. President Joe Biden has nominated Dr. John Nkegasong to lead the well-resourced public health program aimed at combating HIV and AIDS, known as the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. Dr. Nkegasong is currently the head of the Africa Centers for Disease Control, the agency that's leading the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic on the continent. The $7 billion PEPFAR program is known for offering funding and treatment to governments meant for people who are living with HIV, the majority of them in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, if the nomination is approved, the Cameroonian-born virologist would be the first person of African origin to head the program. He was also among the founding members of the program in 2013. Kenya has delayed the introduction of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines because of a lack of the correct type of syringe needed to administer them. The vaccines arrived 10 days ago, but the rollout will only begin next week once the consignment of the correct type of syringes used to draw out the vaccine from the vials arrive. Health Ministry officials say the problem is that the syringes currently available in Kenya are only calibrated to draw out 0.5 mils from the vial. But when using the Pfizer vaccines, healthcare workers must draw only 0.3 mils. The vaccines are currently frozen and undiluted, meaning that they can be stored in ultra-cold refrigerators for up to 4 months. Still ahead on the program. Breaking the banjo turned this Algerian cabinet maker into a luthier. Please stay with us for more details. Welcome back to the program. African young activists are joining their counterparts for the Youth for Climate Conference, a week of climate talks that kicked off today in Milan, Italy, where some 400 activists and more than 190 countries are gathered. Milan is hosting the Youth for Climate event and a subsequent pre-COP26 meeting at which climate and energy ministers will decide proposals to send for consideration at the November summit in Glasgow, Scotland. Rose Kosumbinge is a Youth for Climate delegate from Uganda, and she's calling on her country and African countries to speak up and act in tackling climate change.
I'm really excited about having Greta at the event, and because she's an inspiration to very many young people worldwide. And I think she has done her part and she's still doing her part. And what I can say is that every young person, everywhere in the world, and I come from Uganda, I'm calling on all young people from Uganda and from African countries that there's always something that you can do. So if Greta is doing her part in terms of the media and getting people from the global communities to speak and act and provoke them to act, we other young people can also do some other different things.
Inspired by Sweden's Greta Thunberg, young Kenyan activist Pamina Paulette is leading the climate change action in her country. In addition to rallying citizens to change their behavior towards the environment, she's also a wildlife ambassador for a local animal park.
Kenyan teenager Pamina Paulette holds a placard and chants climate justice into a microphone as she rallies around 50 young demonstrators for a peaceful march to defend the planet against climate change.
Fridays for future, children for.
Paulette's demonstration in the western Kenyan city of Kisumu is part of a global day of youth action against climate change inspired by Sweden's Greta Thunberg.
Everyone around the world, especially youth and children, have already determined their voices to be heard by all different sectors of the country and also the nations as a whole.
When she's not organizing protests, Paulette, who is in school, takes part in cleaning up Lake Victoria, which he says is polluted with plastics and discarded nappies. She takes the items to a local recycling plant, which makes flip-flops. The young environmentalist is also creating eco-products out of water hyacinth harvested from Lake Victoria and is a wildlife ambassador for a local impala animal park and sanctuary.
My message to the older generations and the African leaders in regards to the climate strike is that we need to work together in terms of enhancing more future sustainable projects and having more eco-friendly business that won't be part of the people or even the initiatives that are increasing the carbon footprint in the atmosphere, which will lead to the global warming and climate change.
Young people around the world are demanding urgent action to avert disastrous climate change in the largest protest since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The strike takes place 5 weeks before the UN COP26 summit, which aims to secure more ambitious climate action from the world leaders to drastically cut the greenhouse gas emissions heating the planet.
This climate strike means a lot in terms of having an importance to our current life. Like right now, it's being determined and also tries to strategize on the food system, climate change crisis, and also the global issues that are affecting us, like the global pandemic, and how we can actually utilize our time in order to save the future that we behold, in also making the fruits that we're bearing right now to be enjoyed by the future generation.
A landmark UN climate science report in August warned that human activity has already locked in climate disruptions for decades, but that rapid, large-scale action to reduce emissions could still stave off some of the most destructive impacts. So far, governments do not plan to cut emissions anywhere near fast enough to do that. Friday's strike marks the in-person return of youth climate protests that in 2019 drew more than 6 million people onto the streets before the COVID-19 pandemic largely halted the mass gatherings and pushed much of the actions online.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has said that France has continued support for counter-terrorism efforts in Africa's Sahel region. His comments came in a telephone call with his French counterpart, Florence Parly. France has about 5,000 troops in the Sahel region of West Africa to fight Islamist militants and receives logistical support from the United States. Well, Washington is working on repairing relations with Paris after the announcement almost 2 weeks ago of a new security partnership with Australia, and Britain caused France to lose a major defense contract to build submarines for Australia. Well, more Nigerians are becoming victims of a work permit restriction in the UAE. Till date, at least 500 Nigerians have reported job loss or withdrawn job offers due to their nationalities. One of such is Toby Emmanuel, a merchandiser whose hope of a big career advancement has been dashed. Our correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke, tells us more about the situation.
Okay, so can you share with me how this matter affects you personally?
Actually, this situation has really brought a lot of breakdown for me. Like, I was working here before in the last 7 years, and I have never experienced something like this.
Toby is the latest victim of an ongoing diplomatic impasse between Nigeria and the UAE. For him, an over 1.5 million naira job offer has just been withdrawn.
The last work I was doing was a very low salary work, so I got a new job which is a very high end in salary and a lot of benefit, which is a career changing work. But due to this situation, I was not able to get the work permit.
UAE authorities continue to restrict Nigerian nationals from obtaining work permits, affecting both new arrivals and those already in the country. Toby is just one of at least 500 Nigerians affected.
I feel the reason behind it is because of the flight ban.
A direct flight ban, which began in March, remains unresolved.
The story is they have a protocol that discriminates against Nigeria, and it was specifically targeted at Nigeria. And we said no.
But the Nigerian government remains resolute in its demand for due respect. Toby, on the other hand, sees no correlation between the flight ban and the work permit restriction that has now cost him his livelihood.
I was sick from a couple of days ago. I cannot go to hospital because I don't have any insurance.
Officials at the Nigerian embassy Abu Dhabi are yet to comment on the matter. But Toby's appeal goes directly to the UAE government. All he asks is mercy and the opportunity to earn a living legally. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Mayowa Adegoke for Channels Television News.
After losing his fingers to a work injury, cabinet maker Yahya Chalali resorted to his hobby of playing the banjo to improve his hand function, and this shifted his career to become a luthier. Take a look. When 67-year-old cabinet maker Yahya Chalali lost his fingers in a workshop accident, he resorted to his hobby of playing the banjo as a form of physiotherapy to bring back function to his hand. When Chalali gradually improved, he was at a loss with what to do to generate an income until he broke his banjo. So he broke his banjo and became a luthier.
It's a profession that I love. It was a challenge. I once broke my banjo and I swore to myself not to play music anymore, not to touch a guitar or a banjo or any other musical instrument until the day I fixed my banjo myself.
Establishing a workshop 16 years ago, Chalali is now a prominent luthier who produces custom-made hybrid pieces to international clients from his hometown in the mountainous Tizi Ouzou province of northern Algeria. His dream is to manufacture an instrument merging Italian, Jewish, French and Algerian influences.
It is a project that I have been cherishing for a long time. Projects like this are close to my heart.
While factories made up to 300 pieces a day, Chalali meticulously crafts one per month.
A good guitar is a good guitar, and a factory-produced guitar is a factory-produced guitar. It is not the same thing. The pricing of a musical instrument from a factory as opposed to a handmade one is totally different. A factory makes at least 200 or 300 mandolins per day. I make one mandolin per month.
When he is not building his instruments, Chalali will play them and sing. That's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.